What's something you learned embarrassingly late in life? I'm from Mississippi, and until I was 18, I thought that everyone else in the country counted with their own state. I.e., instead of one Mississippi, two Mississippi, they would count one Nevada, two Nevada, or one Maryland, two Maryland, etc. If you're from Transylvania, then it's one two and so on. It wasn't until I was about 20 that I discovered that you're supposed to add water to condensed soup. Very vividly remember eating condensed tomato soup in my dorm room without any water, so was essentially eating ketchup. That players on American sports teams do not all originally come from the area where their team is from. My dad was fond of framing questions to my brother or me regarding just what on earth we were doing, up to age 10 or so, when it no longer seemed necessary, using the term pray tell, as in what are you doing with the tools, pray tell? I presumed a prattle was a gentle equivalent to goofball or dummy. One day I corrected my brother about some misconception he had, addressing him as you prattle. What did you call him? Asked Dad, who happened to be nearby. A prattle. You call us that all the time. I do? Yeah, you say what is that supposed to be, prattle? I'd never seen him laugh through a facepalm before. Knowledge is power, France is bacon. That all the places in France were not named after wines. I didn't know tortilla chips were made out of tortillas until I was 20 years old and saw the line cook at my job cut up a tortilla and throw it in the deep fryer. Get your oil sizzling. Drop in for about 45 to 60 seconds. Lightly salted. Crunch. Until I was in school for environmental studies, I thought morning dove was morning dove. I usually heard them calling in the mornings, so morning made sense to me. I just learned this now. Thanks. I thought ponies were just baby horses until the age of 23. Until I was 23, I didn't think horses aged like turtles. I'm dumb, but not that dumb. Okay, so I read that as baby horses are known as ponies until they officially become adult horses at the age of 23. Considering that the average lifespan of a horse is like 30 years, or something, I was shocked that the commenters below you had thought the exact same statistic as you did. When I was 10, I thought the word masturbate meant contemplate. So I told my math teacher that I needed more time to masturbate my math problem. Also, when I was 15, I learned that a woman's eggs were not the same size as chicken eggs. I thought periods were so bloody because the chicken-sized egg was stretching them out. I thought sedan was a car brand until I was 22. I thought that until I heard the joke, why do chicken coops have two doors? 'Cause otherwise they'd be chicken sedans, and it all made sense. Why, I was really young. My sister told me she threw her guts up. So I was really afraid of vomiting my entire insides up for years. I was maybe 17 or 18 before learning that it was Timbuktu, not Timbuktu. I thought there was an original Timbuk out there somewhere. I was about 25 when I found out Timbuktu was a real place. I had thought it was just an expression for a faraway place. I had to move to the city of Kalamazoo to realize it was an actual place and not just something Dr. Seuss made up to rhyme with Timbuktu. Things aren't supposed to start to get blurry at about 15 to 20 feet. Learned I needed glasses at like 26 from one of these threads. Yes, people, you are supposed to be able to see individual leaves on trees. Hope someone else can be helped like I was. I'll never forget the first time I looked up into the night sky after I got glasses, and realized that you can, in fact, see the moon clearly. I assumed people who depicted it in art were taking creative license BC, they knew it should look like that for some reason, and that the human eye was incapable of seeing the moon without also seeing two other, blurrier moons, sort of overlapping it. It blew my mind. It was only when I saw someone post a photo on social media of what lights at night look like when you have an astigmatism, and all the comments, that I realized I have an astigmatism and that lights don't look like that to everyone. I just saw a post about astigmatism yesterday and realized that my battle to navigate the streets after dark is not universal. There are people on the roads enjoying crisp vision. 45 years old, wish I had learnt this earlier. When people say quote-unquote, I thought they were saying quote-unquote. That a prostitute doesn't actually sell a piece of their body. Backstory: my mom and I were watching the scene from Titanic, where Jack tells Rose that he painted a one-legged prostitute. I asked my mom what a prostitute was, and she told me, it's someone who sells their body for money. I could not fathom why someone would sell their leg for like $30. LOL, that was just a perfect confluence of unrelated information to confuse you. It was a completely logical connection to make. When we were kids, our parents explained it as someone that you pay and they'll do whatever you want, and it seemed like a variety of handyman. I live near the hospital for joint diseases. When I was a kid, I thought it was a special hospital for people who had two different diseases at the same time. Person with multiple diseases here. I will raise this at the next meeting with the hope of adopting it. When I was a teenager, I posted a status online that said I was jacking off. I thought that meant you were just bored and wasting time, until my older sister messaged me, horrified. When I was a teenager, I thought the expression to eat someone out meant the same thing as to chew someone out. Unfortunately, I was educated on this after I told someone in a church that I wasn't expecting to be eaten out that morning at breakfast. I was 17 LMAO. My father still says this. He's in his 80s, and at this point there's no stopping him. OMG, 81-year-old dad does too. I ate his ass out like no tomorrow. Let me tell you about how I thought you were awarded a Pulitzer Prize. Not too late in life, but I thought my parents were making rum and cokes until I went to college. Which, I think, is a much better name for the drink anyway. Rum and coke. That a coma was a coma. Until I was probably 19, I thought it was akama. I thought you fell into akama. For the longest time I thought astigmatism was astigmatism. So I think we cancel each other out. I once did an entire assignment thinking that ethics and ethnics were the same word. My parents were divorced the whole time and my mom was not, in fact, taking a vacation LMAO. Moving cross-country, driving east to west. Crossing from Idaho to Oregon, noticed huge fields with signs for the Ore-Ida Potato Company. So I was in my early 20s when I figured out Ore-Ida wasn't just a brand name, but was because their potatoes came from Oregon and Idaho. Coca and cocoa are two different plants, not one magical organism, LOL. If one plant gave us both cocaine and chocolate, that would be a compelling reason to believe there is a God and he wants us to fucking party. Oh wow, this blew up. Thank you for the awards and internet points. Homer, Lisa, honey, are you saying you're never going to eat any animal again? What about bacon? Lisa, no. Homer, ham? Lisa, no. Homer, pork chops? Lisa, Dad. Those all come from the same animal. Homer, chuckling, yeah, right, Lisa. A wonderful, magical animal. I learned that pork and beans are not called cowboy beans. I was 18 and asked a grocery store clerk to help me find the cowboy beans. We were looking everywhere and I was getting frustrated because I know that every store carries these beans. After a while I pick up a pork and beans can with a picture and say, see, it looks just like this. He says, you mean pork and beans? Then I realize that my mom called them that so that I would eat them. The look of disappointment from that grocery store clerk haunts me to this day. Dude, that's fucking hilarious. Cowboy beans is a real thing, and different families make it different, but it's generally baked beans with added meat. So pork and beans would technically qualify, although usually there's a higher meat ratio if you make them for a potluck of something. My family recipe has bacon, ground beef, and maybe a little ground Italian if you're feeling fancy. Also, sometimes other types of canned beans are added and simmered in the sauce for a bit. For everyone asking how this differs from chili, the only way I've seen them made around me is with Bush's baked beans or a homemade, but similar sauce as the base. So it's a sweet molasses/brown sugar sauce versus a chili seasoned tomato-based sauce. Also more bacon than one would usually put in chili. A little ground Italian if you're feeling fancy. Did you mean Italian sausage, or is this a Sweeney Todd situation? That bonsai are not a species of tree, but a way to grow them. Any tree can be a bonsai. I suspected it was the same with lots of people, but I found out it wasn't guerrilla warfare, but guerrilla warfare maybe in my 20s. The disappoints of growing up, they just keep coming. I'll take it a step further. I thought it was racist, because I always heard about the guerrilla fighters in Africa. I was just like, dude, they're soldiers. You can keep that shit to yourself. The saying is, nip it in the bud and not in fact nip it in the butt. A few months ago, 2 of my colleagues both handed in their notice at around the same time. I kept reading, hearing the sentence, "They're both moving on to pastures new," being thrown about the office in the weeks leading up to them leaving, and I hadn't heard this phrase before, and thought that was the name of the rival company that they were going to. I thought it was weird that nobody was talking about how they were both leaving for the same company. I was in the car with one of the ones who was leaving, and said, "So where is that you and X are going to be working? Is it?" And just before I could embarrass myself and say pastures new, they interrupted me, and said they're not going to the same place, and asked me where I had heard that. I think at that moment I realized I was stupid and didn't mention it again. I was probably 21 or 22 when I learned that whole milk is only 3% fat. I always thought it was 100, and when I saw reduced as being 2% I thought, why wouldn't they do 50% or somewhere in the middle? Would 100% fat not just be literal fat? I think I was in college when I realized that Mario and Luigi are plumbers. I thought they just went and up down these tubes just because that was the theme of the game. I'm 44 and never made the connection between the pipes and the plumbers. OMG. Don't tell my kids, they'll never let me live it down. That pineapples grow on the ground, and not in a tree. I actually just learned this, just now, at 28 years old. My sister was in her 50s when she found out the meaning of, "You have an addictive personality." She thought after all these years of therapy that it meant that people were addicted to her personality. We laugh hysterically when we talk about this, in a very sad way. I thought that horses had toes until I was 22. I thought the hoof was a horseshoe and the toes were tucked inside. How did I learn how wrong I was, you ask? I was walking past a cavalry museum and saw a horse statue and loudly remarked, "It must hurt so bad when they fold a horse's toes to put them into the shoe." Dozens of horse enthusiasts turned and looked at me with wild bewilderment in their eyes. This one absolutely made me giggle. Just the visual of this happening is fantastic. I hate the image you just put in my head of a completely normal-looking horse, but with human feet. This is endlessly distressing. If horses really looked like that, I'd cram their feet and hooves too. I'm now imagining that instead of hearing a clip-clop, it would be more like a slap slap slap, as if someone was wearing flippers. Just in case you needed more distress. I used to think that the Diet Coke bottles on the side of the road, which were half full of pale yellow liquid, were unfinished Diet Cokes that had been bleached by the sun. About 2 years ago, I saw one of these bottles being ejected from a truck and I realized the awful truth. I'm 53. Birds have sex. I thought that the mother bird laid the egg, and the father fertilized it later. I was 18 and asked my mother what the birds were doing. To be fair, that's how some fish reproduce. However, in 95+% of bird species, the males don't have penises, they mate by pressing their cloacas together. Male waterfowl and ratites, ostriches, and have penises. Dave Barry once wrote that this was the realization that the Wright brothers needed to make an airplane that could fly, remove the external genitalia. Not me, but my wife. My wife's dad always likes to mix idioms for fun, i.e. barking up a tree without a paddle. So a lot of times my wife will say something like twist my leg instead of twist my arm, and then when I get confused she'll stomp her foot and say dad. It's very cute. While watching Game of Thrones, I asked my husband when dragons went extinct. He had to pause the show for that one. St. George killed the last dragon. I didn't know I was circumcised until I was 15 or 16. I was arguing with a girl online. I thought the head was the foreskin and that circumcision cut the actual head of the penis off. My sister, a nurse, didn't learn until her mid-20s that rabbits did not in fact lay eggs. In the last year I found out peanut butter is brown. I'm 34. And horrendously colorblind, if that wasn't obvious. I thought it was green. That Cheesecake Factory is a restaurant and not an assembly line of workers making cheesecake. I always envisioned you would go in there and watch them and eat a slice, sort of like a brewery. I'd like to add that I've lived in close proximity to multiple locations my entire life, and my sister used to go all the time with her friends. I thought they all just really liked the cheesecake, and the factory vibe of it all. It's not until my now fiancé asked me to meet her and her friend there for drinks that I figured it all out, at about age 22 to 23, lol. It's an assembly line. Just one made up of customers. Seriously? A 90-minute wait, at 4:15 p.m. on a Sunday? Sir, this is a cheesecake factory, not a Wendy's. Just this week I found out about the little button on the back of the socket driver that pushes the socket off. I have owned this same socket set for about 30 years, and I have a dedicated screwdriver that I keep with my sockets, and use to pry them off when I'm done using them. I will be 55 years old soon. That Jacques Cousteau was a real person. I always just thought he was a fictional character like Sherlock Holmes until I was in my 30s. This is something my little sister did through high school. We're about 8 years apart, so we never overlapped in school. She's always been a straight-A student, and I found out she worked extra hard because she wanted to catch up to me in school. So we could be in school at the same time. I almost cried. Thanks for all the awards. Never had any of those before. You've made a girl with the flu feel a little better today. And for those of you who asked, yes. My sister not only caught up, but surpassed me. She's a beautiful young woman who graduated with high honors in psychology, and is going on to complete a master's degree. My little brother had a meltdown at the age of 4, when I informed him that he would never be older than me. You're going to be so embarrassed when he tricks you into boarding a spaceship traveling near the speed of light while he remains stationary. My sister is 3 years older than me, and I spent my entire elementary education trying to catch up to her. It culminated with us as the final two in the school spelling bee finals, me in 5th grade versus her in 8th grade. Needless to say she hooped my ass, and then apologized after LOL, but I cherish that memory. Jackalopes are mythical creatures. I was 18, I think? To be fair, I've seen a platypus, rhino, and a giraffe. Those are some BS animals. Wild rabbits can get gross on their heads that resemble tiny horns. But they are due to a disease. And they look nothing like antlers. You don't have to rip the plastic top off of your new deodorant with your teeth or pliers or anything. You can just turn the base until it comes up enough to just take it off. Oh my God. I should return this master's degree to the university. First time somebody's master's degree has directly made me feel better about myself. Okay, so like, This isn't really a common fact, it's just incredibly stupid, lol. When I was in high school, my mom got a hysterectomy. At the same time, there was a fridge in her room that she and my stepdad used for snacks to hide them, and she would never tell us what was in it and said we were never allowed to open it. So, logically, I just assumed she kept her uterus or ovaries in the fridge because for some reason I thought that's what people do is keep removed organs. Till I was 15 I thought this. Why? For spares? Posterity, my mother still laughs to this day because it was just their snacks that they did not want eaten, and I took it in a direction I'm sure made her question why she had children. To be fair, my sister thought a hysterectomy was getting your bladder removed, so that's what she thought was in the fridge. She was much younger than me, however. I thought that prima donna was prima donna, and that it meant everything before the singer Madonna, and just assumed she was some kind of universal queen. I also thought it was prima donna, but I thought it just meant that the person was starting to behave like Madonna. Like they're prima donna now, and will eventually go full Madonna. Thanks for watching this video. Hit the bell next to subscribe so you never miss a video. Like, comment and subscribe if you are new on the channel.